Greeting everyone, I'm Kevin and happy Asexual Awareness Week. Today I am going to read 4 books that has something to do with asexuality. So this is the first installment of An Asexual Reads Asexual Books. The 4 books that I'm going to read for this video is Elizaway, Every Heart a Doorway, Scorpio Hates Virgo, and A Quick and Easy Guide to Asexuality. So how this is going to work, I'm going to read these 4 books for this video, and then I'm going to read some more books for the next installment of this until I have read like a lot of books. We'll see how many books it will end up being, but I'm only going to rate these books based on the representation of ace-spec, meaning asexual spectrum characters. So I am only going to comment on what I think about the representation, how I think the authors dealt with the representation and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into plot and other kinds of stuff. I'm only going to talk about the asexual aspects of each book. I thought it would be kind of nice to start off this entire video by rereading an old favorite. I wanted to add this to the list because it has asexual representation that I don't like, and I wanted to read it with the asexual representation in mind and have a conversation about the representation and why I don't like it. So the first book that I'm going to read is Scorpio Hates Virgo by Anita Sunday. So let's do it. Hi, it's 11:45. I finished Scorpio Hates Virgo and I have thoughts and feelings. Everything that is purple, like the purple tabs, are the things that has to do with demisexuality or asexuality, and like everything in these books that will have something to do with that will have these purple tabs. And this is always so horrible in my opinion, because I love this book. I have given it 5 stars. The first times that I read it, I gave it 5 stars. And then, like, I love everything about this book except for the demisexual representation. And the whole thing that the asexual character in this one is called Cal. And he is a beautiful character. He is the Virgo, just like me, which I thought was kind of interesting, that me, a Virgo who is demisexual, and he is a Virgo and he's demisexual. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But with him, there were a few things about him that I didn't like. And the thing is, I have talked to a lot of people on the asexual spectrum. I actually reached out a year ago maybe, to demisexuals specifically. I asked them what they thought about sex in a relationship. Is that something that is important or is it not important? And quite a lot of people responded, and no one said that sex is an important part of the relationship. And I think as a community, the asexual community, and like the different parts of being asexual, we kind of acknowledge the fact that you can have a relationship without having sex. And since a lot of us don't experience sexual attraction until we get to know a certain person, or maybe we are like asexually fluid, that we move from being asexual to not being asexual, like from experiencing sexual attraction to not doing that, and you know, things like that. And so I think a lot of us, because we're so used to not experiencing sexual attraction and interest to people or anything, like when I say to people, it sounds like maybe animals are okay with something, but that's not what I mean at all. I just mean that we don't experience sexual attraction or interest to anyone, and that's okay. But that's an issue that I find with this book, as well as another book that I read that had a demisexual character, a book that I thought about bringing up in this vlog but decided against. That book is called On Thin Ice. It's a college hockey romance, and I hated it. I read like half the book, and the whole plot of that book is this player character who is both a hockey player and a player, you know, in the sheets or whatever. And he sees this gorgeous NHL hockey player who he wants to have sex with, but this guy is demisexual. And so he says, like, I'm not, like, I don't experience, like, I'm not interested in sex with people I don't know. And our main character, who is the player, he creates a plan to get this guy to like him enough so that they can have sex. Like, the entire thing is for this person who is not on the asexual spectrum getting close to someone who is on the asexual spectrum, only to have this asexual person have sex with them and then leave. Like, that's the premise. And I was just like, as a demisexual myself, as someone who identifies as someone on the asexual spectrum, that book, like, no. And that's why I decided I don't want to talk about that book at length. I don't want to read that book at length fully for this project. So the demisexual representation in this, the reason I find it horrible is because I feel like his identity, his demisexuality, is used as a plot device to make the romance more slow burn. And like that, I feel like that is the entire point of his sexuality in the book. Because he actually says that, like, before they start dating, before they do anything like that, they kiss once, I think, and then they're kind of like flirting, and they're like, we don't know what this is, kind of thing, and they're both avoiding talking about what is happening between them. And then they have sex, and then they go back to not talking about what is happening between them, and are, you know, stuff like that. And then they start dating. That's what I find bad about the representation, because it really feels like he is demisexual just for it to be slow burn. And I find it disrespectful to have an asexual spectrum person that's a very, like, aspec. I don't know how many people actually know what aspec means, but it's asexual spectrum. That's why I tend to say the entire thing. But to have an aspec character start off a relationship by having sex is very, very weird. Like, it's a choice. It's a choice. It's a bad choice. It's the wrong choice. But that's the choice that Anita Sunday made. And I just hate that, like, how that whole thing is portrayed. Yeah, not a big fan of that. And because of how the representation is, I have read worse representations than this, but because of how it was represented and stuff, I am going to give this 2 stars. The representation gets 2 out of 5 stars. It wasn't the worst representation that I've ever read for asexuality of any kind, but it's not good. It's far from good, and it's far from respectful. And so it gets 2 stars. Sorry, not sorry. And so now I'm going to move on to this short book, and it's Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna McGuire. I don't know anything about this except that it's a portal fantasy. People walk through a door and they get to a different world, kind of. I have no idea what character is on the asexual and or a romantic spectrum in this. This is not a reread the way that Scorpio Hates Virgo was. So I'm going into this completely blind, and I will let you know what I think about it and what kind of representation it has. Hi, it's Monday evening. I finished this earlier today, but I've been at work, so I haven't been able to do an update. And as you see, like, the purple tabs, as with Scorpio Hates Virgo, are everything that has to do with asexuality and aromanticism. But I'm just gonna start off by saying I hate it. The representation in this is, yeah, I do like a few parts of it. I like the whole fact that, like, the explanation of what asexuality meant to Nancy, who is the asexual character in the book. I like that. There was a conversation between Nancy and her roommate called Sumi, and Sumi says, like, she makes a joke that, do you want to fuck him? Like, out of nowhere, in my opinion. But she says, like, do you want to fuck him? And Nancy's like, no, I'm not interested. And Sumi is like, well, in that case, you have to know that I'm taken. And Nancy says, it doesn't matter if you're taken or not. I don't do that with anyone. And Sumi just asked, like, are you celibate? And Nancy said, no, celibacy is a choice. This isn't like a choice. I am asexual. I just don't get those feelings ever with anyone. Like, that's kind of how she explains it, which I think is like a nice explanation. Like, it's not too deep, that it's very like surface level explanation, but I think it's like, it's fine. I don't get those feelings. I'm asexual. Like, I understand where that is coming from. Like, I think that explanation is okay. Like, it's a good explanation. Like, sometimes less is more. Like, an author who isn't asexual trying to explain to someone what asexuality is to the main character when the author themselves isn't asexual, like, that's noticeable. So I think Shannon Maguire did the right choice by keeping it very surface level. So then the question is, why did I hate the representation? I'm just gonna say like this. I'm giving this 2 out of 5 stars for representation. It was like, at least Maguire tried. The explanation was fine. The execution was not. And the reason I think the reason I don't think the representation in this book is good, and the reason I would not recommend this book to asexual people, is because, so I need to like provide some backstory first. The whole premise of the book is the fact that there are these doors that are opened for certain individuals, usually children, to their ideal world. And when they step through these portals to other worlds, they get to the place where they belong, right? So, and the whole book is set at this boarding school where children who went to other worlds, they go there for like therapy and stuff, finding, community, instead of being surrounded by people telling them that they're crazy and that they were kidnapped, and like saying that didn't happen, like you're insane, that didn't happen, like messing with their minds. But in this boarding school, everyone went through that thing. Everyone walked through a portal to another world. Everyone had experienced that. So they find like community in each other. And the thing is that Nancy spent some time in the Hall of the Dead, and she spends the entire book longing to go back to the Hall of the Dead, which in itself is problematic, but that's not the point of this. The reason I think the representation is bad is because, as a lot of us know, when we tell someone that we're asexual, the reaction is like, oh, it's like, how does that work? Like, are you a ghost? Are you a plant? Like, a lot of people take away like the human aspect, because you can't be an alive human being if you don't want sex, and if you don't have those feelings, how are you human? Because it's in the nature, it's in biology that we have a sex drive. Like, there are so many mammals that don't have sex unless it's for procreation. But that is like a whole thing that a lot of asexuals have heard, that we're compared to ghosts because we can fall in love, but we don't want to do the dirty things. And I don't think sex is dirty. That's just like the slang word for it. I just wanted to clarify that I don't find it dirty. But the whole thing is that Nancy, throughout the book, like, people make jokes that, oh, are you even alive? Like, have you stopped breathing? And the whole thing that she can turn into a statue, that she can like go lifeless. And that's why I find the representation to be bad. Because like it would be fine if there were more asexual characters. Like if the bubbly personality character in Sumi, like if she was also asexual, like that would be like a whole other thing, because then you have this bubbly optimistic character who is asexual, and you also have this girl who longs for death basically and can seem lifeless and is referred to as a ghost and as a statue and things like that. That would have been another thing, because then you would have had like not a stereotypical representation in a bubbly, happy, optimistic person being asexual, but instead the only asexual character in this book is a girl who wants to go back to the Hall of the Dead, and she is considered to be a ghost. Like I just feel like that whole thing, like putting all of that together, is what makes it an issue for me, because a lot of us already feel like other, you know, and the whole like that a lot of people have that as a comment. And I know that an asexual representation that I like is in Shadowhunters, when Raphael says that he doesn't like sex, he doesn't really care for it, and the first thing that Izzy asks him is if he's asexual because he was turned into a vampire. And that is like, that's what I'm talking about, like that whole thing that you, in order to be fully human, you desire sex, but if you're not fully human, you don't desire sex because you're not human, you know. And that's why I find the representation in this book to be bad, because it's taking a stereotype and taking a negative thing that a lot of asexuals hear, that we're not desirable because we don't want sex, and that sex is a normal person wants sex and desires sex, and we're not that, so we're not human like that. So I'm giving this 2 out of 5 stars for the representation. I was very close to like putting it to like 1.5 out of 5, but I decided like it could have been worse, but it could have been a lot better and more respectful at the least. Hi, I'm sorry it's been a while. I completely forgot to update all of you, but I read Elizaway and I finished this a week ago now, actually. I just completely forgot to talk about this book. And this is very similar to Every Heart a Doorway in a lot of ways, because the main character identifies as asexual, and it has to do with like these otherworldly paranormal things. Like this is very much magical realism in paranormal. Like I'm not saying that this is the same as Every Heart a Doorway, it just gave me the same kind of vibes, which I thought was interesting, but I really loved this a lot more. But when it comes to the asexual representation in this, there is only one little purple thing here. It's because it's only once mentioned in this book. And the asexual like thing in this is that Elizaway is asexual, and someone else mentions like, I know you're asexual, and like, you know, like mentioning it that way. And I kind of went back and forth how to rate the representation in this, because the book isn't about her being asexual. It's not about asexuality and what asexuality means to her, or, you know, anything like that. Like, she just happens to be asexual, and that's good representation. But I feel like it would be kind of mean to give this book a high representation rating when it's only mentioned once in the entire book. Like that, like it doesn't seem fair you know, like the other books that I have read so far, I've given low ratings because they did include asexuality, but they didn't do a good job at doing the whole thing with asexuality. This book, Elizaway, is an amazing character. Like, she is really, really awesome. And I think she is good asexual representation, but asexuality isn't that big a part of the book. It's never, like, explained what asexuality means to her, which, you know, it doesn't need to have that in a book, because this isn't about asexuality. This isn't that kind of book where asexuality plays a bigger part of the story. It's just, she just happens to be asexual. And so because of that, I'm going to give the representation in this book 3 stars. It was good representation, but it's not fair to compare it to books that have more mentions of asexuality. Like, this is good. It's mentioned only once, and like, it can't go wrong with only mentioning this person is asexual, and that's that. So I'm just going to give it 3 stars to be kind of fair. And the last book I'm going to read for this vlog is an ARC that I got that is a quick and easy guide to asexuality. So this is a graphic novel that is written by Molly Muldoon and Will Hernandez. And it's a graphic novel. I don't really know that much about it, but the fact that it's kind of like a non-fiction graphic novel about asexuality. So I thought it would be really fun to read it for this vlog, because I got approved for this ARC yesterday, and I was like, yes, I have to include this. So I'm gonna read a quick and easy guide to asexuality now and let you know what I think about it. Hi, it's like an hour later. I just finished this beautiful book, A Quick and Easy Guide to Asexuality. 5 stars. Like, honestly, 5 stars. This was beautiful, and the asexual representation in this is also 5 stars. Like, both of these people, the co-authors, Molly Muldoon and Will Hernandez, both of them identify as asexual. And Molly identifies specifically as demisexual, but Will refers to himself as, or refers to themselves as, asexual. And I really enjoy the fact that they divided the book into what is asexuality and aromanticism. Like, what's the difference there? What are common misconceptions? What are common questions that us asexuals get asked by people? Don't you want a family? Don't you want love? Like, aren't you lonely? Like, we can still have fulfilling relationships. We just do not experience sexual attraction. Like, that's it. And I really enjoy the way that they explored those things and the way that they explained everything. They did it in a way that was kind of like a conversation with people, that it was Will and Molly, and then they had another character was like, wait, I don't understand, like, how does this work? And then Molly and Will explains, and this character continues to ask like follow-up questions, and they explain it that kind of way, and I thought that was very smart. And there were always, like, there was also a few parts of this that was kind of like, how to tell if you're asexual, but I just really like the way that they explained and discussed asexuality and aromanticism and misconceptions and what it's like, the whole spectrum, and the fact that people think we're broken and that there's something wrong with us, because, like, how can you be a human being and be asexual? And that's kind of like what I talked about with Every Heart a Doorway, the fact that she was seen by the other people, she was kind of compared to non-humans, like ghosts, statues, and stuff like that. And that is, in my opinion, a big reason, like I talked about that with that book, like that's a big reason why I didn't like the representation in that book. And they talk about that, the way that people frame us asexuals as not human, because we lack this human feeling or experience, because sex is a human experience and everyone wants to have sex because that's human. And like, no, it's not. Like, being human is a lot of stuff, but experiencing sexual attraction isn't one of them. Like, we have moved so far with the definition of human, like not that long ago, like several centuries and also decades and like years, depending on where you are in history and where your society is in history as well. Like, it wasn't that long ago that people discussed that, you know, being gay was not human, because being human was being straight. And being trans isn't human, because being human is being cis. And you have like these kinds of ideas of what being human meant. And I really enjoy that they're kind of demysticizing asexuality and the fact that we're still human. We still experience everything that a human experiences. And that's, you know, fine. Like, we're okay. But that's why I didn't like Every Heart a Doorway. I really recommend this book. This book is coming out on the 29th of March, 2022. So next March, you will be able to get your hands on this. I completely recommend this book to everyone who wants to learn about asexuality, who have, you know, questions about asexuality and what it means to be asexual. Maybe you have a friend who identifies as asexual and you don't know what that means, and like doing research on the web is kind of like confusing or something. This is a very easy to understand way. Like, it's explained in such a way that anyone can understand what it is and how it is, basically. And if you feel like, I don't know what it is, like I might be asexual, but I don't know, and like this can help in a lot of ways. Like, if you're curious about asexuality, totally recommend this. If you are an educator like me, I do completely recommend getting a copy of this for your school library and to have kind of like in the nurse's office or anything like that, so that your students, when they learn about sexualities and, you know, birds and the bees, that they have access to this book. I feel like this is that important, and I completely recommend this. And well, then that's it for the first installment of An Asexual Reads Asexual Books. And I read 4 books, 2 stars, 2 books with not so great representation, and 1 book that was kind of like, it was just mentioned in 1 line, and 3 stars. Like, it was like great representation, but it was 1 sentence, so I can't give it more than 3 stars. And then we ended with a graphic novel that was perfection. It was non-fiction. Like, it's the only non-fiction book on this entire list of books that I will be talking about, but I think we ended on kind of like a high note. And happy Asexual Awareness Week again, and I will see you in a while with the second installment of An Asexual Reads Asexual Books. See you then. Good reading. Bye.